We're going to now move on to item number 4, and I would like to welcome back again Director Gray and our esteemed partners, Mark Hilbelink, hope I pronounced that okay, Executive Director of the Sunrise Homeless Navigation Center, and Shayna Dunitz, Managing Director of Austin Housing Connector, for a briefing on prevention, diversion, and rapid exit homelessness services. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Allow me to reintroduce myself, as JC says. David Gray, Director for Austin Homeless Strategies and Operations, and Pastor Mark is here, right there. I'll give the presentation, but Pastor Mark is available for any questions about his program. Shayna messaged me this morning. She sends her regards. Unfortunately, she will not be able to attend today's presentation. She got called away to Seattle for business purposes. So today's presentation will talk a little bit about our homeless prevention and our diversion and why these strategic investments make sense for the city of Austin. And so I'll provide you with a brief overview of what homeless prevention and diversion is and what that means for HSO, highlight some of the benefits of each strategy and why it is that we are starting to enhance our investments in both of these strategies, explain why these strategies are specifically critical to our system and what they mean for Austinites. And then we'll do 2 program spotlights, one about the Wayfinder program, which is administered by the Sunrise Navigation Center. And the second is our landlord engagement program, which is administered by our friends at Housing Connector. So when we talk about homeless prevention and what is this, these are programs and services that provide support to households who are at imminent risk of homelessness so that they can maintain their housing. The goal here is to keep families who are housed stably housed through strategies such as emergency rental assistance, utility assistance, landlord mediation, case management, and other forms of either one-time financial investment or short-term case management to help them stabilize in their existing housing. The benefits of this are very clear, but I'll cover them. The first is it reduces the inflow into homelessness. You know, a lot of our city's efforts have focused on folks who are chronically homeless and have been on our streets the longest, as it should be. 30% of our population is chronically homeless, but we also have to get upstream. We have to stop the inflow of new households, new individuals, and new families onto the streets, and homeless prevention allows us to do that. It also allows folks to maintain their stability within their existing community. You know, when somebody gets evicted or they lose their housing, if we're able to rapidly rehouse them, oftentimes that's not in the neighborhood where their social relationships already exist. And so by homeless prevention, we're able to help that community remain stabilized and prevent some of the displacement that I know we're all very concerned about. It's also much more cost effective compared to shelter and rapid rehousing. Typically, homeless prevention and diversion services are a one-time $2,000 to $3,000 cost compared to shelter, which carries an ongoing cost of about $24,000 per bed annually, and rapid rehousing or PSH, which is closer to about $35,000 to $40,000 per unit annually. And so getting upstream is significantly less expensive. It's a greater return on investment for our taxpayer dollars. And last but certainly not least is that it minimizes the trauma associated with housing loss. This is especially important for nearly 2,000 AISD students who are experiencing homelessness and the 50% of AISD families that are housing insecure. We know that if we could help somebody avoid the trauma of homelessness, not only does that help them today, but it also helps their kids in terms of their life outcomes. If you are a young person and you experience homelessness as a young person, you are 10 times more likely to experience homelessness again as an adult. And so by keeping these households stably housed, we're solving problems today, but we're also getting ahead of intergenerational cycles of homelessness and trauma. Diversion and prevention are sometimes conflated as the same thing, but they're different. Diversion are interventions that help people who have lost their housing. They're about to enter a system like a shelter, but instead of having to bring them into shelter for shelter care, we are able to quickly help them find an alternative housing solution. So these are things like family and friend mediations and reunifications, or short-term financial assistance, or rapid problem solving. And so instead of bringing somebody into the shelter system, we're able to kind of save that bed for somebody else who probably has a more severe need. by quickly diverting those folks away from the homeless response system and back into a housing opportunity. This has its own benefits. Off the top, it's reducing demand for shelter and rapid rehousing services. It also provides a quicker pathway to stability than our shelters are sometimes able to provide. It allows us to strengthen and build upon some natural support networks, especially if we're able to facilitate family and friendship reunifications, and allows the rest of our homeless response systems, like our shelter beds, our rapid rehousing programs, and our PSH, to take those resources and focus them on people who have greater needs and need more time to stabilize their living situation. Now, we are investing in these services as a city, first because it aligns with our overall goal to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, and it especially speaks to rare and brief. We do not want people to have to spend multiple weeks in a shelter bed or multiple months in a rapid rehousing program or multiple years in PSH. We much rather get them quickly rehoused or keep them stably housed. The second, as I mentioned, is that it reduces overall system costs and pressures, improving the efficiency of our system. It is a much lower dollar cost intervention than shelter, rapid, and PSH. The third is that it supports our households before crises deepen. You know, in the system that we inherited that focused predominantly on the most vulnerable, that system required folks who recently became homeless to be homeless for multiple months, experience multiple traumatic events, and become more vulnerable and score higher on a vulnerability assessment before they can qualify for help. They were essentially stuck in the middle of a donut hole between being stably housed and then being extremely victimized. These services allow us to fill that donut hole. It is the donut hole filler that my kids love from Shipley's. Little donut hole. It allows us to make sure that these folks get that sweet support before their crisis becomes even worse. And then last, it allows us to build a balanced portfolio. And you've all heard this from me and my team before, that it's important for us to prop up all parts of our homeless response system to level set the resources in the system with the needs as we're seeing them. We inherited a system that did not invest a lot in prevention and diversion, and now we're trying to level set that portfolio and make sure it's balanced. So to do the two program spotlights, the first is the Wayfinder program. This is a program that the City of Austin seed funded with about $500,000 in support. Sunrise has successfully raised another approximately $500,000 in private funding and philanthropic funding. And so we're really appreciative for our partners who are able to bring in multiple funding streams to help us maintain these programs. Wayfinder focuses on the ability to house, meaning it is a diversion program that's helping folks who are housing insecure or recently homeless, but they can quickly get rehoused. We want to make sure that those households are able to get quickly rehoused. And it disproportionately serves multi-person households. I think the majority of people who've been served so far are families with young children. And so when you look at how this program stands up to some of the other diversion programs in our community, Wayfinder has become the #1 source of rehousing in Austin since it launched last year. In FY25 alone, it served just over 950 individuals, a third of which were rehoused with the $500,000 in support from the City of Austin. The average household size of individuals at move-in is 2.1. I don't know how you get to a 0.1 of a person, but that's what the math says, so there we go. And more than 440 children were rehoused through this program in its first 11 months of operating, which accounts for over 90% of all child move-ins across our entire homeless response system. And so again, kind of speaking to how effective this program and our diversion programs are at helping households get housed and stay housed. The average cost per move-in is $1,700 one time, if you look at it from a per person cost, we're talking about a one-time cost of less than $800 per person. So again, an extremely cost-effective solution that's also helping a lot of people avoid a lot of trauma of homelessness. And when you think about the staying power of this program, To date, 94% of those clients who were served through this program have remained housed and have not returned to homelessness, meaning that they have not reconnected to our homeless response system. So in summary, it's a low price point for us to serve a lot of people, and we're seeing that folks who are housed in this program are able to stay housed. Housing Connector takes a slightly different approach. Housing Connector is our program that's focused on recruiting landlords to make more units available. So while Wayfinder is focused on getting people housed, Housing Connector is focused on creating the housing opportunity. And so through this program, over the course of the last 8 months that we funded this program, 40 residents have been directly housed through Wayfinder into Wayfinder units. Now, there's another 100 folks who've been successfully housed through Housing Connector assistance. And so I'll break this down. So we fund Housing Connector to both recruit landlords, but we've also capitalized them with essentially an emergency housing fund at $600,000. And so Housing Connector could either help facilitate the direct housing placement, which they've done for 40 residents, or organizations like LifeWorks or Caritas or Change One can contact Housing Connector and say, hey, we have a family or an individual who is ready to move into housing that they've identified. They just need help paying that first last month rent deposit, or they need help paying off past due arrears that we've negotiated down. And through the partnership with Housing Connector, those individuals are able to get access to the resources in that stabilization fund and then move in. So I think of it in basketball terms of direct baskets versus assist. So Housing Connector has 40 direct points and about 100 assist. The average household size is 2, meaning that oftentimes it's couples or it's single parents with children. Housing Connector has successfully recruited more than 40 properties across the city, totaling about 8,000 units that are committed that will be available to folks who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. When we look at the racial diversity of the households who are taking advantage of these programs, 67% are households of color. I had mentioned that partnership program that Housing Connector has with folks like LifeWorks and Caritas. So we currently have 13 community partners, including some of our fellow agency partners like Austin Community College. And just this morning, we started talking with AISD's Project Help, facilitating a relationship there so that our AISD families who are housing insecure can have a direct pathway into Housing Connector resources to remain stably housed. And typically, the amount of time it takes from a household to identify their housing to move in is 15 days, which is lightning fast. I think when we last looked at the HMIS data for coordinated entry, the amount of time it took for somebody to move in from their first coordinated entry assessment to their move-in was around 400 days. So to go from 400 days down to 15 days is, in no short order, like a significant improvement. So just some key takeaways. Our prevention programs are designed to keep people who are currently housed, stably housed in their community. We want to avoid the costly crisis that comes with homelessness. Diversion is predominantly looking at people who are newly homeless. And so how do we give them safer alternatives to quickly get rehoused and reduce reliance on our shelter beds so that we could focus our shelter beds on some of the more extreme cases in our community. Both of these strategies are extremely cost effective, again, costing anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000 for that one-time intervention. And they're also trauma informed in that they don't require people to score high on a vulnerability index in order to get access to the service. These types of interventions reduce pressure across our homeless response system. They save our taxpayer dollars. And again, they allow our more intensive resources to focus on our higher need clients. And so we're going to continue to make these investments. You should expect to see more from us by way of these investments. And as we launch our public-facing dashboards around program performance, we're going to make sure that our dashboards include the references to our prevention and our diversion services. And so with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back to you, but I'll also invite Pastor Mark to come join me in case you or your colleagues have questions for him. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Alter.
Don't even have to ask. I do have a couple questions for Mark, if I see him down here. Well, first, at least, off the top, I think this is not only so promising and impressive, but it is the future for us. It is the only intervention that I see that is scalable and scalable quickly. We, as you mentioned earlier, we have to build out the whole system, but if we can't turn off that spigot, we're just flowing through constantly and never seeing any kind of results. So I'm really excited that we're trying new things and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and this appears to be one of those things that works. My question for you, Mark, is what is your estimated need? If you had unlimited dollars in this program, how many people do you think could be served by this, or right now, like on an annual basis, and the cost of that?
Thank you. Good morning, council members. Thank you for having me. And thank you to Director Gray for such a great presentation. It's a good question, and I want to thank all three of you here on the dais, because we've had really good conversations about this particular thing in the past, and love to have it with you, Councilmember Duchin, as well. But what I would like to say to that is we have about a year and a half of data right now on Wayfinder, and that's part of the data that Director Gray was presenting here. But what I would like to say is that our numbers right now say that if we could raise about $5 million annually, we think in theory we could house about 40% of the homeless population that's being seen outside, which would be absolutely remarkable. So one of the things that was not presented here, but I'll just kind of say, is if you look at the annual database kind of presentations that happen at the end of the year, and these are going to come out probably in February, March of 2026, and you look at the data that's on the ECHO dashboard, you will see very little, even with the massive investments we've made, you will see very little movement on PSH, very little movement on rapid rehousing. Those parts of the graph stay pretty stable. They've increased a little bit as we've invested, but they haven't increased to the level that we've invested in them. When you look at what's going to come and what we predict will come when they pull these numbers in spring of 2026, you're going to see something like a 3 times growth in the amount of total people housed next year, which is going to be absolutely wild. We haven't seen a growth like that in our community in decades. And that's going to be almost entirely a result of these, what they call minimal housing interventions, these MHIs. And that is what we're talking about here. And so right now we're processing about $1 million of pass-through money. And that's getting us about 150 people a month. So it's going to end up being in the range of 1,800 people in a calendar year. We believe we can push that number to about 4 million without scraping the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. Clearly, this intervention is not for everyone. It's for people that have income. It's for people that can potentially get income, and that is not everyone. But our estimation and the numbers that we have so far point us towards the number of 40% of the homeless population that we think we could reasonably rehouse. Now, I will say every 10% you grow in that number, it's going to get slightly harder, right? Like, it's really easy to get that first 10% through this program. It might be easy to get the second 10%. As you get into the 30 and the 40%, it's going to get a little bit harder, but we have strategies kind of thought out about that. But to think about the actual possibility of housing 40% of the homeless population for $5 million, when our total annual budget, that we've just proposed is well over 100, it would be a shocking achievement if we could possibly do it. And I'll just say, this is something we are actually getting questions from other major cities about already, because the numbers are just so huge. Yeah.
Well, and that, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we can't build thousands of PSH units on it, that would take decades. We can't build or secure other, whether it's shelter or other interventions. This and prevention, I think are our way to really see a meaningful change. And we have to continue to invest in those other interventions. But I will also cheat a little bit. I've seen your slide deck, so I just offer a little context here that we have over 36,000 vacancies citywide in our apartments, with another almost 60,000 units to be built over the next 3 to 4 years. And so if you're talking about trying to house around 6,000 people, that's 10% of our, or not even, of our units available. So we have the solution. We just have to get people into those units, and I think we can do it if we're aggressive. And so let us know what we can do, how we can help, and I hope to have you back in 6 months and just see what, if anything, has changed and how we can continue to make this progress.
Thank you. For Mark, since you're here, can you just talk us through, because incredibly successful rates here at the Wayfinder program. How are you identifying individuals who can be served by the Wayfinder program?
It's a great question. It goes to an earlier comment that David made around the hotline. I think there's been a couple changes here that have dovetailed simultaneously, and that thanks to great leadership by the Homeless Strategy Office. One of those is that there has been more of a centralization of access points. And I think that we have for too long asked ourselves what is good for nonprofits, when we really should be asking ourselves what is good for the end user, right? So if my sister becomes homeless tomorrow, what do we want for her? We want an easy access point where we can do as many things right away as possible. That's what we should be doing, and that's the cheapest thing to do, because then they come with all of the assets that they bring personally, not just money. They bring their family supports, they bring their furniture, they bring their fact they still have their kids and they haven't fallen into addiction. That's when we should reach people. And so I think that as we move forward in that, we really just have to think about being able to reach people in that space where they're coming into that experience of homelessness. And as we do that, we're going to continue to see a significant amount of achievement. But I think as we identify people, the advancement of the hotline took 5,000 calls last month, which is just wild. It has far surpassed any in-person day center that we have in our community. And now that we have these video pods that we're putting out across the community, we're also increasing access points for people experiencing homelessness to be engaged where they are, not have to go somewhere to engage. And so most of these interventions are happening digitally. A lot of these people we never even meet. And they're happening all across Central Texas. And so we're able to use the digital tools that we've got in our tool bag to be able to also make this happen. So the fact that the hotline exists is probably the number one thing that we're using to identify. It's also going to be really helpful with the new prevention project that's coming on as well. I will caution that, though, to say, and this is a kind of a question, an answer to Councilmember Alter's question. One of the things is that we've kind of also become a victim of our own success, in the sense that if you look at the demand over the last 12 months, people have realized that this works. Not only individuals, but agencies have realized that this works, and it works as well as anything in our community. And so the demand has continued to grow every single month. And where we were 6 months ago, we were running out of money at day 29 or day 28 of the month. We are now at the point where we're running out of money at day 10 of the month, which means for 20 days of the month, I've just got demand, and not able to meet those demands. So that's where we're at. We could be housing at least double the amount of people that we're housing right now through this program if it was correctly funded.
So walk me through this. So if my neighbor becomes unhoused, we call the hotline, someone picks up from your team, are they then guiding them through the housing connector piece where they have a property identified that will take them in, or do you have your own set of identified properties?
Yeah, so the beauty of this is it really capitalizes on the assets that the person brings. And one of the best assets is the person who is the end user has the most immediate need for this service. For years, we had relied on case managers and whether case managers were motivated enough to go and do this work. The person that's the most motivated is the person that's on the receiving end of it, right? And a lot of times they're mom with kids. And, whereas I might be able to go sleep 3 nights under a tree, sleeping under a tree when you've got 3 kids crawling over you is a whole different thing. So these moms are highly motivated. And it is not uncommon that we get a phone call at 10 a.m. and that person's housed by 4 p.m. that same day, which is absolutely wild. And what is going on, to answer your question more directly, is that these are entirely, at this point, units that these people are identifying. So to Councilmember Alter's point, we're talking about something in the range of 50 to 60,000 open units in our community where we could house the entire homeless population 7 times over right now if everybody could do this task. But we're not only incentivizing them to kind of go do the work, I think the foundational change in this that should not be ignored is that for a decade, what I've been doing homeless services, we've basically been telling people to wait. We've been telling people to do an assessment and to wait. And they do. They listen to us. They go wait under a bridge or under a tree, and they deteriorate. And that is just absolutely a waste of their time and energy when we can now tell them to go. So I'm going to steal a pop culture reference since David already had one. My pop culture reference is The Office. And in The Office, Michael Scott says to a group of school children, if you can graduate from high school, I will pay your college. And it motivated those kids to graduate. Now, he didn't pay for their college, but he motivated them to all graduate. What my team started doing about a year and a half ago is we just started promising people, hey, if you can go find yourself a 12-month unit, we will pay for you to move in. And what it did was make them active participants in their own rehousing. And for the first time, we just saw people, instead of leaving to go sit under a bridge or leaving to go push a cart, they left to go to apartment complexes and go hit them up and try to get a unit. And that cannot be understated. Having people play an active role in their own rehousing is such a powerful thing that we have not really been seizing on in the past.
Very powerful, and certainly would love to see our city invest more, particularly in this very effective program. Is this, so the individuals who are housed through Wayfinder, they do not have to complete a coordinated assessment?
They don't have to. They can, but they don't have to, and usually don't.
Okay. And thank you. My next question is for Director Gray. What percentage of folks remain housed through the Housing Connector program?
I'll have to get that data from Housing Connector. I don't have it readily available. I know it's pretty high. I just don't want to give you a specific number right now, but I'll get that for you.
Sure. And then, because I know in your presentation you said there's 40 properties that are identified with landlords who are willing to work with us on getting people housed. Do we know the capacity of those landlord or those housing properties? Like, do they have 10 units each, or any sense of how far we could go?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, some of the properties list a couple of units at their site. Some of them list all as the units become open. So I might be a landlord with over a 50 unit apartment community. As apartments become available and vacant and they're ready for a lease, through my Housing Connector partnership, I can either lease those kind of market rate on apartments.com or whatever, or I could put them up as available on the Housing Connector platform, which then the service providers like Mark and others have exclusive access. And on that platform is where somebody can apply at a reduced rent rate and also with different screening criteria. And that's part of the landlord commitment, is both making the unit affordable and also making it more accessible. So whereas for everyday person like David, they might do a criminal background check, and if I have more than one criminal offense in the last 3 years, then they're going to screen me out. Whereas through Housing Connector, they might say, look, we'll consider up to 3, and they have to be the most serious offenses. But if it's 3 misdemeanors, we don't care. We'll still consider your application. And so Housing Connector makes the resource available that way. The units get listed as they become available. So in total, there's about 8,000 units that we have access to. But of that 8,000, I think the last time I checked with Shayna, there's maybe about 150 that were currently listed on their platform. Now, I do think, like Pastor Mark said, because of our rental market and where it's at now, there's a lot of self-motivated people who are finding great deals on their own. There are a lot of great landlords out there who are offering move-in with 6 months of free rent. And so for folks who can and do find their own unit, it's a great resource. For Housing Connector, a lot of their folks tend to be maybe younger people who don't have the ability to find and negotiate and kind of really understand what makes a good unit. And so they're going through a LifeWorks or a Change One and a case manager. And that case manager is working with the client using the Housing Connector platform to identify a housing property that works for their client, and then to help their client through that application process.
Very good. Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Yes, Vice Chair.
First, really appreciate the presentation, and certainly look forward to connecting with you, Pastor Mark, to get some additional details and learn more about the work you've been doing. I really had one clarification question and one history question. And I think the clarification question is for Director Gray. you had talked about, when talking about Housing Connector, you used a sports analogy from tennis or rowing or whatever it was, direct points and assists. I think I understand the direct points, but can you expand on what the assists are?
Sure. The assist could be something like, let's say somebody calls, I'm going to use Pastor Mark and his team at Sunrise as an example. This actually might be true, so you can fact check me on this. But let's say somebody calls into the hotline and says, hey, I found a unit that I'm ready to move into, but I need help paying the security deposit. If Pastor Mark's...
That's the housing fund. That's the $600,000 housing
fund.
Right,
that's the $600,000 housing fund. So Pastor Mark's team, if he's not able to fill that gap on his own, through their partnership with Housing Connector through the housing fund can cut that check, but it's counted as a Sunrise placement, but Housing Connector gets the assist. And that's the basketball analogy.
Got it. Okay, basketball. So the direct points, and it's sort of like a two-pronged program where you've got a way to connect with landlords, and then you've also got this housing fund as a supplementary way to solve the problem. Is that about right?
Absolutely. And I think it really gets back to a point that Pastor Mark said that we don't want to lose sight of. It's how do you make the process easiest for the client? And rather than force Sunrise or LifeWorks or Caritas or ACC to tell somebody, hey, you have to go talk to Housing Connector and sign up for their program and meet with their case manager in order to get funds, it's a simple call from the agency to the other agencies saying, I have a client right now who's ready to move in. Can they tap into your funds to do the move in? And Housing Connector is cutting the check. Now, people can go directly to Housing Connector and receive that quality of support too if they need it. But we are trying to make the systems as useful for the clients as possible because it saves the clients time, it helps them avoid trauma, and frankly, it makes our system more efficient, which is something that all of us want.
Okay, thank you for helping me understand that. The history question is, when I go back and I look at the 2020 Barbara Poppy report, it pretty clearly, in my view, identifies that diversion in particular, but also prevention, are far more economical than pretty much most other approaches. And so I'm wondering, can you help me from a historical perspective, understand, was it a case where we had to figure out the specific implementation that's taken us to where we are today? What accounts for the 5 years when we kind of knew that was the economical way versus where we are today, where we've got programs that look like they're highly successful and could be expanded, but there's been a gap of several years where I'm not sure I fully appreciate what the journey has been between understanding that information and delivering the solutions.
Yes, sir. So I was with the city of Austin during those years, but I was not in this role. So I'll tell you the story as the story's been relayed to me, which is during the COVID pandemic, there was a real focus on folks who are medically vulnerable, folks who are chronically homeless, and wanting to find opportunities to get those folks first into Pro Lodges, our system of care, to keep them kind of safe from the COVID pandemic, but also make sure that we had housing opportunities for those individuals. And so a lot of the focus at the time went into rapid rehousing programs as a strategy to get folks rehoused quickly, especially folks who had been the most vulnerable and homeless the longest. And then as we receive federal dollars that were one-time dollars, strategically investing those one-time dollars into one-time efforts, which is how we wound up building a lot of PSH and now funding a lot of PSH services. 30% of our population is chronically homeless. And so we have to keep an eye on that extremely vulnerable community. And I think that was the orientation of my predecessors. But I think, as we've come in, we haven't lost sight of that group. We're still investing heavily in rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. We built over 400 units in the last year. We have over 700 still in the development pipeline. But again, we got to make sure that we're not forcing people to become extremely vulnerable before they can get help. Just like that Poppy report said 5 years ago is what we're saying today, which is if we invest more in the upstream interventions, it saves folks a lot of trauma, it saves the taxpayers some resources, and it keeps people off of our streets, which ultimately is the improvement for everybody. So I don't know that it took 5 years to implement. I just think priorities shifted as the pandemic happened. But now that we're coming out of that pandemic and you have an Austin Homeless Strategies and Operations Department, we've taken a more holistic look at our homeless response system. And this is one of the ways in which we're investing to make that system more balanced across all the interventions.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I appreciate that context. Thank you, David.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions or comments?
I have one question, actually. Sorry. Obviously, we've highlighted this diversion program, the Housing Connector. There are other diversion programs out there. You know, I'm more familiar with LifeWorks, but I know they're not also the only ones. I'm curious what type of overlap you think, like let's just say we poured it all into Wayfinder, how much overlap do you have with these other organizations with the diversion services they're providing?
Yeah, I think that was directed at me, but I'll take it. And it's actually is an answer. I almost jumped in to answer Councilmember Duchin's question because I think that there's a tie-in here, and that is that this is a relatively new concept in homeless housing across the country. This is not the whole concept of diversion and rapid exit is so new that within the last 2 years they literally just they switched the definitions of what they were 2 years ago, just randomly. It's such a new concept that we are very much, we talk with folks around the country. Austin is very much on the front edge of this, which is why we're getting phone calls from other cities. This is very innovative work. And to your point, it maybe shouldn't be innovative work, but in homeless services, sometimes simple solutions are innovative, and cost reasonability decisions are fairly innovative, unfortunately. So we are leading the way. I think that's something I would say. The other piece to answer that question is that we didn't have the centralization 5 years ago to pull this off. This sort of a system, for the system to work or for a prevention system work, you need a central access point. And until the hotline existed, we really didn't have that as a community. And so that's really what's changed the game to enable us to have the tracks for these trains to run on, or the backbone for this. But I think that, I'm sorry, can you ask your question again?
Oh, just wondering, like, if how much, if you took care of everyone,
yes,
that you think, how much the other providers overlap?
So what I was going to say to that is this: diversion means very different things to pretty much every organization. That's one of the problems. It's kind of like one of those catchphrases that means a lot of things. Like trauma can mean many different things to many different people, and diversion is one of those words. And so, to answer your question, there are many different versions of diversion. Some people count diversion as things you do for people while they're still housed. We call that in our community mostly prevention, but there are communities that call it that. There are, we have a mental health diversion center in our community, right? They are not doing any of the stuff Wayfinder's doing. That is a completely different definition of the word diversion. I actually stopped using the word diversion because it was so confusing to the people that we talked to, and we just started using the word rapid exit or using quick resolution terminology because it's so confusing. The other pieces within homelessness that diversion can mean, for instance, TOOF has a very good program called Going Home, but their program is entirely putting people on trains and planes to send them to family members. That is diversion, but it's not what we do mostly. What we do is kind of paying people's move-in fees. And unfortunately, they're all called diversion. What LifeWorks calls diversion actually is a different thing altogether than either of those two things. So one of the challenges here is that, yes, there is crossover, and yes, we do hand people off to each other when necessary. Probably the only other version of diversion in the community that's similar to ours is We Can Now. We Can Now has actually recently developed a program that's fairly similar to ours, because we have some similar thought partners. But I will say diversion can mean very different things across the board. But what is interesting is that those of us who work in the family space especially have found, and this is LifeWorks and SAFE and Sunrise and a few others, we have found that this is very much the thing that is our new strategy. It's interesting how when you talk to LifeWorks, when you talk to SAFE, when you talk to Sunrise, all of us are shifting our programs in this direction. It is something that it's not even something that David's telling us to do. We're just all naturally going in this direction because it's the direction that we feel like in a system where we're going to have limited resources and anticipate federal changes, this is the way. And we're all kind of naturally inclining in that direction anyways, but diversion means different things to different people, which is why we call it Wayfinder.
Sure. Well, And I love that it is serving our families and, putting 4 people in a unit for a similar cost of putting 1 or 2 people, and just the future of that family can't go unstated and understated. So, all right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for the presentation and for the insight. Colleagues, we are now going to go back to our Sobering Center Board of Director interviews.